Well, today is the church's birthday and we are celebrating. It may be dull outside, it may be a little chilly and windy and rainy, but in here, it's good. We've got our lovely tongues of flames on the sides. We've got the red happening. It's a birthday party. Who doesn't love a birthday party? Okay, maybe there are some of us who would say that we don't like the birthday part, but we all like a party, right? You can't have a birthday party without having a birth. And we all know, and we have all heard stories about the pains of childbirth. And women will tell you it is the worst thing ever. They will also say that if it was up to men, it would never happen because of the pain. It certainly would never happen more than once. And here we hear the story about 12 men. 12 men who go on to take the world into a place where God intended us to be. 12 men who would birth a religion, who would transform not only their part of the world, but in fact, the entire world would be changed by the gospel. And with every birth, with every baby, with every new endeavor, there are growing pains, there are challenges, there are hiccups, and there are times when you wonder what you're doing. Certainly as parents, as we try to raise children, we often have that. And I'm certain these disciples had those moments, absolutely in spades. They had their challenges, they had their hiccups. Just look at this story. It starts out by hearing that they were all together in one room. And we talked a few weeks ago about the fact that when you are hurting, when you're in pain, when you're struggling, when you are grief-stricken, you come together with like-minded people to console each other, to comfort each other. You want to be with someone who shares your pain, and we hear that that's what was happening. I am sure that they were sitting in that room and they were grief-stricken. They were reminiscing. They were probably confused and wondering, what now? What do we do next? They had thought to follow Jesus, the Messiah, out of slavery and oppression. They had thought that he was the one that was going to lead the revolution against the Egyptians. They had thought, as the two disciples said on the way to Emmaus, we had thought he was the one to redeem Israel. And now, he's gone. Instead of following this one man, to follow him and to learn from him, they were just 12 men sitting bereft and looking for something, looking for anything to guide them, to answer the question, what do we do now? And as is often the case, when you are looking for something specific, something big and huge, sometimes you overlook something really important. I want to tell you a little story about Post-it notes. I love Post-it notes. They're everywhere. At home, they're everywhere in my office, and you will always often see me with one as I go to do the prayers of the people. It's got all the names that I want to remember because they're not going to stay up there. And Post-it notes were invented in the 60s. There was a man named Spencer Silver who worked for 3M. He was a chemist. And he was supposed to be inventing a strong adhesive for the aerospace industry. However, he accidentally made the exact opposite. A weak adhesive made up of tiny spherical acrylic fibers. And these spheres were nearly indestructible, and they would stick over and over and over again. And at first, 3M considered his invention absolutely useless. Now, Spencer wanted to market his invention, to put it on bulletin boards so that people could come up and put papers or notices up on bulletin boards and take them off again without using tacks or pins. 3M didn't go for it. But 5 years later, another chemist at 3M, a man named Art Fry, he had another idea. He was a frequent church choir singer, and he invented the Post-it note in a moment of absolute frustration. He was always taking little pieces of paper and sticking them into his hymnal. And when he'd open it, they would fall out and on the floor and he'd lose his page. And so he put this adhesive on the piece of paper rather than on the bulletin board. And the Post-it note was invented. They were looking for this adhesive for the aerospace industry, and they created something that is marvelous and wonderful. I love Post-it notes. Just as an aside, the yellow on Post-it notes, the first paper that he put it onto was yellow. And so instead of branching out to different colors, he said, no, yellow, this is the way we've always done it. They kept ordering yellow paper. It doesn't take long for that to happen, does it? These disciples, they were looking for something amazing. They were looking for someone to lead them. These inventors weren't looking for something that was right in front of them, and neither were the disciples. They were looking for something earth-shattering. These men were about to go on a world-changing mission, and I don't even think they realized it. I'm certain they had absolutely no idea. They had thought to follow the Son of God into freedom, and they were looking back. They were looking back and saying, he's gone. What do we do now? But this day is a turning point. This is the day where they stopped looking inward and started looking outward. They stopped looking back and they started looking to the future. Jesus had promised them an advocate, someone to be with them, and this was the day that this came into fruition. The Holy Spirit poured out on each one of them. Divided tongues as fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. And something wonderful was born. Could they even imagine that they were birthing a religion? Could they even know that they were starting something world-changing? Would they have even thought of it that way? All that they had ever known was the Jewish faith, the Jewish religion, which had been with them for thousands of years. In fact, most of them, all of them probably, were raised in the Jewish heritage. They knew nothing else. And they knew that Jesus was a Jew. They weren't birthing anything new. They were just going out to tell Jesus' story, to share his teachings. And they probably thought that it was just going to be in the immediate vicinity. But with this moment, this life-changing moment where they began to talk in different languages, the whole world was opened up to them. It became something bigger than they had ever imagined. And the Christian faith was born. Would they have done things differently? Maybe. I'm sure as parents we look back and think, oh, I would have done that differently. But they followed the leading of the Holy Spirit. Each new undertaking was a challenge. Each time they went to speak, they knew that they were facing persecution. and even death. Looking back, would they have changed it? I don't know. Hindsight is 2020. But this moment birthed a life-changing experience for them and a life-changing experience for each of us. They had challenges. Boy, did they have challenges. But they didn't give up. Because it is challenge that shapes us as human beings. It is challenge that has shaped the church into what it is, into something vibrant and strong, certainly in the first centuries. And I wonder if the challenges we face as a church now are designed not to break us, but to make us stronger, to change us into something that is bigger and better, to share the gospel. This time when they were mourning their leader was hardly the beginning of something mind-boggling for them. But they began to share the gospel. And they started right away. If you read a little bit further on, just 6 verses after we finish today, we hear Peter starting to tell the story that very morning. He said, "You that are Israelites, listen to what I have to say. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with deeds of power, wonders and signs that God did through him among you. As you yourselves know, this man, handed over to you according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of those who knew him outside of the law. But God raised him up, having freed him from death, because it was impossible for him to be held in death's power." Right away, he shares the good news, the entire gospel in those few sentences. And here we are, thousands of years later, sharing that joy, sharing in the birthday of the church. And it is a joyful day, and it is a meaningful day, and it is a birthday. And where would a birthday be without cake? This week I was watching the new Odd Couple, and Felix was trying to impress his girlfriend, and he made a cake for her with her grandmother's recipe because he wanted it to be meaningful and important, not the same old, same old. He wanted something that said, "I love you." And so today, on the birthday of the church, we are not going to do the same old when we have the Lord's Supper. When we come into the Lord's communion table, today we are going to have cake. Yes, cake. And there will be some who say, well, that's just not right. But it is precisely because of this table that we can have joy. And cake is just wonderfully flavored bread. And it bears as much resemblance to the bread that Jesus had as those little cubes of Wonder Bread that we serve every other communion. It's a joy-filled day. It's a day of celebration. It's a day when we come and we share the good news again. When we light a spark, not in ourselves just, but in others. I want to share with you a wonderful story. I got an email about a week and a half ago, and it talks about our faith in a real way. It talks about the table with joy. It talks about who can come to the table, because you know what? It's not our call. Jesus says, all who wish to be with me are welcome at the table. Here's the email. Last PD day, my granddaughter, I'm not going to say her name, that's not my choice, who is 5, I believe she's 5, I know her well, attended your Camp Everest and has been proclaiming the gospel ever since. She has been talking about forgiveness, the power of prayer, and conquering fears. Today, I took her to my church, Knox Presbyterian in Welland, where she goes with me frequently as her mother works most Sundays. We welcome children at the Lord's table, but she has never shown an interest, nor did I think she was ready. Today, she jumped up when Sunday school was called back into the service and held another adult's hand and went up for communion. It was intinction today. Afterwards, she told me that Jesus invites everyone to eat with him, and he shares really good. Thanks, Sherry and Lisa, for lighting that spark. We will do our best with his awesome help to keep it shining brightly. There you have the reason for what we do. There you have the reason for the church's existence. This is the real reason. The gospel being shared, the flame or the spark, as her grandmother put it, being lit, the gospel being overwhelmingly accepted. This is the most amazing meal on this joyful day. And so, let's sing happy birthday again. Throw the next slide up there. Happy birthday, dear church, brothers, sisters who care. We are filled with God's Spirit. Amen.